All right. Well, thanks for joining us. It's crazy to think it's been 5 years. Uh, is there anyone here, just by show of hands, if you're comfortable, anyone here that was here on launch day 5 years ago in the basement? Yeah, crazy. It's a long time ago. Things have changed a lot. Now, I think it's important to mention, like, the reason that we celebrate this, when we talk about our birthday, we're not talking about, like, our birthday, like the people up here. We're talking about our birthday as a community, even if you weren't here on launch day, because everything that this church is because of everyone that's here. The people that have participated, that have invited people, like Ali said before. If you've been part of this in any way, shape, or form, you're part of this community. And so we are celebrating our birthday, and that's something that's important to us. Today, we're starting a brand new series. If it's your first time with us, my name is Lou, one of the pastors here. We usually take this portion of the service, and this is the teaching portion. We group our messages together. We call that a series, and so today we're starting a brand new one. It's a great time for you to join us for the first time or second time if you're here with us on Christmas Eve. We're talking about feelings, how what someone feels shows us who they are. Specifically, how like Jesus felt shows us who he is. So we'll start out with a little story. Okay, actually, I got 2 quick stories for you. So when I was in middle school, I went to this school. I went to a private school that had a mission statement. And there was this one day, one of my teachers gave our class the assignment. He said we had to memorize the school mission statement, and in 1 week, we had to say it in front of everybody in the class. And it was short, just a couple sentences. And so we had a week to do it. That day came around. It was the following Friday. The teacher, his name was Mr. Adams, he calls one student up to say it. The guy gets up front, a friend of mine, his name's Eric, and he very bravely is like, I didn't do it. And so he goes, okay. And the next student comes up, and the next student doesn't know it. And then the next student doesn't know it. Next student doesn't know it. And then Mr. Adams leaves the classroom, gives us about 10 minutes, comes back, and all of us had memorized it, and we all got full credit for the assignment. It was great. Mr. Adams, super nice guy. Nicest guy in the world. Second story. So, same story. When I was in 7th grade, I was in this character development class. I didn't tell you that the first time. Failed the character development part. Just kidding. And we had this assignment. We had to memorize the school mission statement. And when the day came for us to do it, my friend gets up and he says, I didn't do it. And I look over Mr. Adams, and he's confused. And this guy's really, really a very nice, genuine person. He's like confused. His face starts to turn red. He's like, what do you mean you didn't do it? He's like, I didn't memorize it. He goes, okay. He calls up the next student who also doesn't know it. And he gets even more upset. And then the next student comes up and doesn't know it. And at this point, his face is bright red, like he's furious. I've never seen him like this before. And then he begins to lecture our class. And what he explains is that the mission statement, like, this is what the school is all about. Like, this is why we're here. If we don't understand what the mission of the school is, then we're missing the whole big picture, the whole thing, like the whole kit and caboodle, and he's going on, and I'm watching him explain this with like such deep passion. And then he says, which I thought was a pretty bold move, he looks at us and he goes, I'm gonna leave the classroom. And when I come back in a couple minutes, all of you are gonna have it memorized. And then he walks out. And in the next few moments, we were the quietest group of unsupervised 7th graders you will ever hear about. Like, you can hear a pin drop, and because when you see someone act like that, who doesn't typically act like that, it says something, right? And so eventually, he came back, and we all did it, and we all got it 100% right. So there's 2 stories, right? 2 stories. Same story, but they're different. In one, you have a concept of Mr. Adams, who's this really nice guy, but it's kind of 2-dimensional. You kind of have to fill in the gaps by yourself. Maybe he's a little bit of a mush. Maybe he's a pushover. Maybe he doesn't care too much. Sure, I'll leave the classroom and whatever. But the second story, I didn't just tell you what he did. I explained how he felt. And knowing what he feels gives you a window into the kind of person he is. Like, at the very least, you know he cares so deeply about this school and about these students he's investing his life into and about whether or not they understand what they're doing there. Like, you get such a more, like a clearer picture It's almost like it's another dimension. It goes from 2D to 3D when you know how he feels. What someone feels shows you a lot about who they are. I was just watching an interview. Someone was interviewing Mike Tyson, and they were talking about all his knockouts. And the guy who was interviewing, if you don't know Mike Tyson, he's a boxer, knocks a lot of people out. He was a boxer. Well, he kind of is still a boxer, but shouldn't be. Anyway, so they're like, so when you knock someone out, like, what are you thinking? What's going through your mind when you land that blow? And he goes, honestly, I'm not satisfied. And they go, why? And he goes, because I wanted to kill him. And it's like, all right. Like, that's a little unhealthy, right? But you get a window into who he is when you know. Like, it's not just about technique. There's something happening within him, and that gives you a clear picture, positive or negative, of who he is, of what's going on. For a lot of us, when we think about Jesus, or when we talk about Jesus, we talk about the things he did, like all the famous things. You know, you might have heard he walked on water, right? Or he died on the cross. There's all these things. And the ancient writers who recorded his life weren't the most descriptive in the way that they wrote. And so a lot of times the stories can feel a little bit two-dimensional. Like, you can almost try to fill in the gaps yourself. But every once in a while, the gospel writers, the people who recorded the biographies of Jesus, they tell you how he felt. And if you're not careful, you could just kind of breeze right over it, right? Just like it's another detail. But really what it does is give you like a window into who he is and what he cares about. It alters your concept of him. And so what we're gonna look at over the next couple weeks are the things that he felt. And what I think you'll see, and really the reason why this matters, no matter where you are in your faith, and no matter how you feel about Jesus, whether you're like totally on board and super Jesus fan, or you don't even want to be here and you're just waiting for this to wrap up. Like, no matter how you feel about him, your concept of him, how you understand him as a person, it will either draw you to him or it will push you from him. It will either cause you to lean into him when things get tough, or it will cause you to pull away. It will either make what you believe and feel like a privilege, like a gift or an obligation. And so it's so important that we see these things that are going on within him, these feelings, these emotions, because what he feels shows us so much about who he is. And I think if you're like me, what you might see is that he doesn't always feel the way that we expect him to feel. And it says a lot about who he is. And so we'll jump right into the story. This is recorded by a guy named Matthew, who was there with Jesus while Jesus was doing all the things that he did. And Matthew recorded and apparently took notes of the things that were happening. And at this point, when Matthew is writing, Jesus has become wildly famous, like inconveniently famous, like how celebrities can't leave the house because of the paparazzi. Like, this was how it was with Jesus. They literally say it was difficult for him to travel, to go place to place. Even when he was teaching, he had to teach from a boat because the crowds would crowd him up against the shore. And so there's all these people, frankly, making his life really difficult. And Matthew kind of summarizes, like, all right, so here's what Jesus was doing at that time. He gives us, like, zooms out and gives us a picture. And he says this. It says, Jesus went through all the towns and villages. This is what he was doing. He was teaching in their synagogues, which was kind of like their church. It was set up so that they could teach from the front. And he was proclaiming the good news of the kingdom. Meaning, we've talked about this in past series if you were here. He was explaining what it looks like and how good it is to live as if God is king. And all that that means. And he was healing every kind of disease. It says, when he saw the crowds, the thousands that were crowding him, the people that were making his life inconvenient, the people that opposed him, the people that had questions, the people that weren't sure, the people that were half in, half out. When he saw the crowds in general, it says he had compassion on them. And there's the feeling. Compassion. He says they were harassed and helpless like sheep without a shepherd. Before we get into that, he had compassion. He felt deeply compassion. Now, I don't know what you think of when you think of the word compassion. Maybe you think of like pity, feeling bad, or sympathizing. And sure, that's all, I guess, part of compassion. But the word in the original language has this idea of feeling something in your bowels. All right, now we don't really use bowels in that context. It's not really very moving, no pun intended. But for them, the bowels were like the heart, like how we use the word heart, right? It's a literal thing, but they use it to represent their emotions. What they're saying is, like, it was an emotion that was so strong, he felt it in his body. You ever been there? Like you feel it, like in your gut, or you feel it in your heart, or however you want to articulate it. It's not just happening up in the head. It's like it's hit you on a physical level. Like there's something that does that to you. Think about the last time you felt that way. Like just to go there, just to experience it. Like for me, lately, really this has been since I've become a dad, for me it's really hard to watch movies where there are kids getting hurt. Like if something bad is happening to a kid, I don't want to watch it. I just want to get up and leave. And Allie gets really annoyed. She's like, come on, so we'll fast forward. But I feel like, especially if the story's made up, if it's fiction, it's like, okay, the world is difficult enough. I don't need to watch made up people experience fake pain, right? But there's something within me, I'm like, I can't watch that. Like, I feel it. Maybe there's something that breaks your heart. There's something that causes you to feel deeply. Like before we even look at what he feels this toward, I think it's worth recognizing that Jesus felt deeply. He felt deeply. For me, this is a hard concept for me to get my mind around. Like it always has been. We talk about God like he knows what's going to happen in the future. So how can someone who knows what's going to happen in the future, like how can they feel deeply, right? But there's a lot of things about God, frankly, that I don't understand. But what we know and what we're told in multiple different places is that he feels. He is a God who feels deeply. He has real emotions that move him, like you do, like I do. So it means that we're made in the image of God. Like we feel things that he feels. Sometimes, like I feel like if you look at representations of Jesus, a lot of times he's like just blah, like two-dimensional. Like a lot of statues, a lot of beautiful statues, like amazing art, but just emotionless depictions of someone who's just like, he's glowing, he's got like blue eyes for some reason, and his hands are open, and it's a beautiful work of art, but it's a pretty consistent portrayal of a Jesus who just doesn't really feel. And that's not the way that he's explained. He's not explained as someone stoic like that you'd see on a dollar bill. He's explained as someone who feels deeply. So then the question is, all right, like what is he feeling this toward, right? Like, and what does that tell us about him? So if we go back one verse, put the last verse back up here. It says, he felt compassion on the crowds, like toward the crowds. Now, what I've learned in life, right, there are people who like crowds and there are people who don't like crowds, right? I'm not really a crowd person. I love to go to water parks when it's raining. It's like there's no one there. We got the place to ourselves. I love to go to the movies when it's nice outside. It's just nice. Like I'm not crazy about crowds. Just a few days ago, we went to New York City with my in-laws. They came in from Virginia. So we took them to go see the Christmas tree, which is we made some really good memories, and I'm so glad that they experienced it. But my goodness, you couldn't even walk. Like I felt the crowd. I didn't feel for them. I literally felt them. Like everybody's all over everybody else. You just got to push your way through. There's crowd people and there's not crowd people. Jesus, like he sees these crowds, these wildly inconvenient crowds, these people that some of them got it. Like some of them were kind of into what he was saying. Others didn't. Others would be the ones who were telling like the authorities to crucify him later on. These were people that were going to betray him. These were people that didn't get it, people that weren't impressed by him, some that were. Like they're all over the map. It's just people of all different kinds, and he's feeling deeply for people. The idea of compassion, right? Think about this. The last time you felt that feeling, the feeling within you, that heartbreak feeling, the gut level feeling, not just sympathy, but the one you feel in your body. really what's happening is you are wanting for someone else. You are wanting on behalf of the other person, right? Like when I see something in a movie that like hits me, I'm like I want it to stop for the kid, or I want them to have what they need, or whatever breaks your heart. There's this feeling like I want to do something about that. I want that to change. You are wanting on behalf of those other people. You're wanting for them. And the idea here is that Jesus sees these people and he wants for them. Matthew writes this, he writes that they're harassed and helpless. Other translations say they're torn and thrown down, or like distressed and dejected. They use a lot of alliteration in the English translations. That's because in the original language, the words rhyme. So he's trying to preserve that element here. But the idea is that they're not where they could be, and they don't know how to get there. They're looking for something real. The clarification here is where he says they're like sheep without a shepherd. To us, that's like a pretty foreign metaphor. I don't know. I don't have sheep. Maybe you do. But for sheep, the shepherd was everything. It gave them protection. The shepherd gave them a place to belong, like a place where they felt safe, accepted, belong, a place where they really connected with other sheep. Like the shepherd defined the flock. The sheep knew their home by who they were all following. And the shepherd gave them direction. And so what Jesus is saying here is he's looking for these people or he's watching these people who are in search of acceptance. Like how people just want to know they have a place to belong, like they're enough, they measure up. People who are looking for a place of belonging, people who want connection, and people who need direction. And he wants that for them. It's not like he feels pity for them. It's like he wants for them. He wants for them. Now, I don't know about you, like I'm down with the whole acceptance, belonging, connection thing. I get that. Like, sure, I want to be accepted. I want to have a place to belong. I don't want to be rejected. I want to have meaningful relationships. But then you get to direction, and it's like, I don't know if I want to be told what to do, Like, I don't know if I want to follow someone. I want to make my own way, like pioneer, chart my own course. But this isn't how we're wired. Like, we are wired to be followers. And that's why we're referred to as sheep, often metaphorically in these ancient scriptures. Now, again, it's not exciting. Like, no little kid in preschool pretending to be an animal. Like, there's tiger, there's lion. I used to pretend to be an elephant. And there's no kid that's like, I'll be the sheep. Like, it's not exciting. But the idea is that sheep, like, they need to be led. If you have a difficult time digesting this, like I do, right? Like, just look at society as a whole. Like, look at our culture. Look at how big the idea of an influencer is. Like, why do influencers happen? Like, these people on social media, where they just have tremendous followers. Like, an influencer is someone who's leading the way. We want to learn from people who can take us where we want to go. And this is the idea of looking to Jesus for direction. It's not like he needs us to play his little game and check his little boxes and obey his little rules. The idea is that he wants for us. Like he knows how we're wired. He knows how we're made, and he wants to lead us where we were made to go. He said this in another place. John recorded it. He said he came to give life and life to the full. That's what he wants for people. Like deeply for people. And so he sees these people. There's this gut level response. Like, I just want, like, I wish, my grandmother used to tell me, she used to say, I just wish I could give you everything. And I'd be like, thanks, Gram. But it's that idea. Maybe not like Italian grandmother dramatic, but that idea, right? Like, I want for you. And so here's the question, right? Maybe you're not on the church bus. Like, maybe you're not totally on board with it. Maybe you're still trying to figure out faith in, out, you don't know. At the very least, when you think about Jesus and you think about how he feels toward you, when you're not even close to wanting to be on board, when you're like anti-God, church, and Jesus, how do you think he feels toward you in those moments? If you're maybe there right now, What do you think his posture is toward you? For me, for a long time, like what I believed is that he was like disappointed. When are you going to get it together? When are you going to get in line, start doing the right thing, finally kick that habit? Like impatient, annoyed. What Matthew's saying here, and what other gospel writers wrote, is like, no. His posture toward you is like, this is what I want for you. Like, I want for you. I want good things for you. I know how you were made. I know how you were wired. This is his posture toward people. And so this for us, and the before we go there, so here's what he does, right? Now think about this. If he sees these people, he feels deeply, he's moved, like his emotions are moved for these people. He sees them, and you know what he does? You know how he responds? You know what he says next? Like they're watching him, he's clearly like something's going on within him. You know what he does next? It says this. It says, he turns to his disciples, like the people that were on board with what he was doing, the people who already believed, the church people, the people who were trying to live their lives for him, the Jesus followers. He looks at the crowd, turns to the church people, the disciples, and he says, the harvest is plentiful. Like there are so many people who are looking for a sense of purpose, a sense of direction, a place to belong, a place to be authentic, an emotional and spiritual home. The harvest is plentiful, but the workers are few. So he says, so here's what you should do. And he's talking to his followers. He says, ask the Lord of the harvest, therefore, not to do something about those people. But he says, ask him to send workers, to send people to do something about those people into the harvest field. In other words, he's saying, like, he takes the responsibility and he puts it on his followers. He's like inviting them in to feel what he feels. Like start to feel like me, he's saying. And pray that God would do something, that he would send people like you out there to show people who the shepherd is, to show them where they can find what they're looking for. He puts the responsibility back on people. Back on people. Now, what he's not saying, and like you have to be careful when we're talking about this. He's not saying like, you guys have the answers, right? And you need to go enlighten the rest of the world, right? And that's where we find people of faith sometimes with like an unintentional, like air of condescension and arrogance. No, the idea is you have begun to see that there's something to this shepherd. There's something to this guy who takes you in, who shows you grace, who's patient with you. There's something to the purpose that he offers you in life. And so, like, invite other people into it. Because what you have is worth sharing. This is why for us, we say we're a church for people who don't go to church. This is why we're talking about it today on our birthday. It's an opportunity to like refocus. And maybe for some of you who are trying to figure out what we're about, this is what we're about. We want for people who don't go to church. Not because we have arrived or we have all the answers, right? We're imperfect. We got bad habits. We got all the issues. We got so many of the same problems that everybody else has. But there's something real about Jesus, who he said he was, and the things that he said he came to give. There's something very real about that. And so the idea is if he's going to turn to his followers and say, like, go, do something about it. We want to be the kind of church that's there behind him, like, okay. We want for people who don't go to church because we're taught this is how Jesus feels. He wants for people who don't go to church. He desires good things for people who don't go to church. He was for them in their corner. And this is, I think, maybe you think, like this is a narrative that I think kind of needs to change in our culture with the church. A lot of times with church, there's kind of this posture like the world doesn't get it and we're frustrated with the world and let's give up on the world. It's looking at the crowds and feeling frustration and disappointment, not wanting for them and being in their corner. And so we put it on the walls, like front and center, like, no, we're for, we want for, we're in the corners of people who don't go to church. It's not like a cool spin on church. It's coming from the way people feel. And so the church part, like everything a church is, it's in the word church. So if you're a follower of Jesus, you're in that statement, you're the church part. But we are for, we want for, we're pointed in the direction of people who don't go to church. Not against, but for. And the story over the last 5 years has been people who have just gone out into the harvest, as Jesus would call it metaphorically, like just into the world, and not like, behold, I have the answers, but hey, there's something real, like this shepherd is worth following. Some of you know, a little while ago, I told a story about a guy who started coming to our church about 2 years ago. His name's Steve. And he just started coming and asking questions, like just sitting and listening. And then things started to make sense. Eventually, last summer, 2 summers ago, he got baptized and started to follow Jesus himself. And just invited people in. Like, hey, not like, oh, behold, like I'm perfect now and I have all these, but no, like there's something to this. And what we've seen is like a steady stream of people in his life that just keep showing up. Like, all right, it seems like something's working for him. Like, and none of them have their act together. I don't have my act together. Like, none of us do. But it's like, there's something to this. This is what it looks like for workers to go out into the field. This isn't like theoretical. You don't have to move to Africa or like sell everything you have. It's like, if you're a follower of Jesus, let something about your life show the people around you that there's something real. That you don't have to be afraid to admit your failures, because your performance does not determine your worth in God's eyes. Like, that's a powerful thing when people see, like, oh, that person really owns how they screw up. Like, that says something to people, believe it or not. Like, they care. They remember things. They're invested in me for some reason, even though it doesn't seem like they have anything to gain. That's what it looks like to be a worker out in the field, to make a difference. And so the question again is, for you, if you're a follower of Jesus, when you see the crowds, or maybe even like just some members in the crowd who look at what you have and they're like, ew, I don't want to be part of that. It's not my thing. What happens within you? Like, do they become an opponent? Do they become like someone that you give up on, that you like turn off? Or do you feel like, not pity, but like wanting for them? Like, I want good for you. I was talking to Allie about this last night, and she's like, yeah, but what happens if you don't? Like, there's someone in your life and you're like, nah, I got nothing in the compassion tank for this person. What other followers of Jesus have explained, like John, like very simply answered that question. He's like, we love only because he first loved us. Like, our supply comes from how he feels toward us, and we pass that along. In other words, like the answer, the way that you find yourself moved to feel for other people who are imperfect and broken is not by just like trying to like muster it up. It's by stopping and recognizing like there is a God who feels deeply for you even though you're imperfect and broken. And there's something about that spills over to other people. And if you're not a follower of Jesus, is this the picture that you picture when you picture him? Is it like a distant, disconnected Jesus that doesn't care, just waiting for you to get it together? Or is it of one who wants for you? I'm going to ask the band to come back up here, but here's the picture I want to leave you with. It's the picture Jesus painted himself. In John records this, another guy who was there. He records a metaphor, same metaphor that Jesus made at a different time. He says this, I quoted this verse before. He says this, the thief, talking about sheep, he says the thief comes to steal, kill, and destroy. Like there are thieves that come to take the sheep. It's like, but I haven't come to take or ruin or limit you or hold back. He said, but I have come that they may have life and have it to the full. This is what he came to offer. Life to the full. And in the very next line, you know what he says? He says, I am the good shepherd. How good is this shepherd? Right? Like, how badly does he want us to have life to the full? He says, the good shepherd lays down his life for the sheep. That's the picture of compassion. If you're wondering just how badly he wants for you, just how much he wants you to have good things in life, just how badly he wants to give you acceptance, belonging, connection, direction, a sense of real purpose. If you're wondering just how far he'd go to offer that to you, he's saying, if you want that kind of life, I'm willing to give you my own. Like the picture of Jesus on the cross, it's not, like you may have heard, like he died for our sins. The idea is he died to give us what he wants to give us because he wants for us. Because he cares for us. This is how far he'll go. I think, this is the kind of shepherd who's worth following and worth inviting people to follow. This is the kind of hero, kind of savior that's for people who don't go to church, for you, whether you go to church or not. And it's why we here, and for the last 5 years, and Lord willing, for the next 50, is why we are a church for people who don't go to church.